Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. Before this video starts, it might be a little bit laggy, okay guys? So this is like after I filmed the video, okay guys? So, okay, good. Let's get into the video. Okay guys, so today we are going to be reacting to Scary Stories animations. So, this is 17 Scary Story animations. This is 46 minutes, so yeah. Let's get into it. Okay, hold on, let me pause the video. Not this video, I have my PS4, I'm sorry. The girl.
My name is Caitlin. This incident happened when I was 14 years old, and I will never forget this memory. One day, I was at home alone at my house. My mom was still at the office late at night, and my two siblings were at my grandparents' house, which was kind of far away from my home. At first, I was just enjoying my time alone, watching Netflix and doing some fun stuff. However, after a while, I got pretty bored, so I decided to invite some of my friends over. I asked my mom for permission and then called my friends to invite them over. A few moments later, while I was waiting for them, I heard a loud bang upstairs. I was sure that there was no one else upstairs.
That was the next door neighbor.
So I stood up and looked up the stairs with an anxious look on my face. When I was near the stairs, I could see that one of my dolls had fallen. I picked it up, and when I straightened my back, something caught my attention. A little girl was standing upstairs. Well, I could feel that she was staring at me, even though I couldn't see her face clearly due to the darkness. I was terrified, and then someone rang the doorbell. I ran to see who it was, and luckily, my friends had arrived. Thank God, it was a moment of relief that my friends came over at the right time. Soon, I got my mind off of the girl I saw. We sat down in the living room and had fun talking with each other.
You better be sleeping over.
An hour later, one of my friends suggested that we should take some pictures together. So we gathered around one another. We took several selfies while laughing and chatting. Later, as we scrolled through the pictures, we found something. There was a little girl standing behind our couch. What made us even more terrified was the fact that she had no face. I mean, her face was just an empty darkness. No eyes, no nose, and no mouth. Being terrified, I told Cassie to delete that picture right away. However, she said that something was wrong with her cell phone. I snatched the phone out of her hands and tried to delete it. But no matter what we tried, we couldn't delete the picture. Then we heard loud thumps. It sounded like someone's footsteps were coming from upstairs, and our light was flickering on and off at the same time.
What the heck?
We thought that we couldn't stay inside anymore, so we rushed outside in a hurry. One of my friends, Christina, suddenly pointed at my bedroom window and said that there was someone in there. I raised my eyes up and followed her finger, and there she was. It was the same faceless girl we had seen in the picture. My friends and I screamed. I called my mom and explained everything. My mom couldn't believe what I told her, so she made me calm down and said that she would be home in 5 minutes. After she arrived home, she searched the entire house, but she couldn't find any trace of the girl. I hoped that it was just our imaginations. However, we soon decided to move out of the house because I kept seeing the girl after that incident. We finally moved, and from then on, my mom never...
Okay. First thing, if I knew that nobody was home, and I see a little girl at the top of the stairs, that's her house now. She could keep everything. Well, actually, no, she can't. But yeah, that's her house now. She could keep it. No one cares. I'm moving. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
wanted me to be home alone, so I always stayed with my siblings. I still have no clue why the girl haunted me, but I think it was because she wanted us to get out of the house. Well, I'm just glad that I don't see that girl in my new house.
I actually do have Valorant on here, but I just stopped playing it.
This happened to me while I was on my way home one night. I was living in an apartment at the time. When I arrived on the first floor of my building, there was a piece of paper hanging on the wall that said that the elevator was out of service. No, not again, I said to myself. I lived on a pretty high floor, so without any other choice, I had to walk up the stairs. I was walking up the stairs out of sheer desperation, and all of a sudden, I heard something. Then I began to feel uneasy. I knew that crimes often occurred around my neighborhood, especially targeting people who were alone. When I listened closely, I could hear a pair of men's shoes and a pair of women's high heels walking at the same time. I assumed that it was a couple. You guys are having a hard time like me. I'm struggling to walk up the stairs, especially this late at night. I thought to myself. I sighed with relief and turned my head around. However, I will never forget what I saw at that moment. There was a man who was crawling with a pair of men's shoes on his feet and a pair of high heels on his hands. He was crawling towards me. This happened a few years ago.
You can't just cut off like that. What the heck?
In the neighborhood I grew up in. When I was around 6 years old, there was an incident where an old man who lived right in front of my house was murdered by a robber. Not only did the robber steal all his money, but he also stabbed him brutally with a knife and then ran away. According to the police, the crime scene was as horrible as it sounds, and unfortunately, to this day, the robber still hasn't been caught. When they moved the old man's dead body and passed by my house.
Are these ghosts or people? I feel like if you could look right here, they're floating. So I don't know if they're ghosts or people.
My mom covered my eyes with her hands so that I wouldn't see it. Nevertheless, I could see my neighbor's face through the gap between my mom's fingers. After that, even after a few months had passed, the old man's house wasn't sold. It was because there were a few strange rumors spreading around the neighborhood about his house. Some said that people would always hear the old man's coughing and sobbing coming from inside whenever it rained. 10 years later, all of the people who moved into his house had to leave, and now his house is being used as a warehouse.
Warehouse? Was that wasn't even scary.
When I was in high school, I was crazy about a boy band and used to stay up late at night watching their videos. Because of this, I used to fall asleep at around 3 or 4 a.m. The town I lived in was sort of a new city under construction, so it was really quiet and there was no one outside during that time. One night, it was around 3 a.m., I suddenly heard a woman singing outside. It was an old song, and the strange thing was that the woman was singing just one part of the song over and over again. She didn't move on to the next section. She would just start singing, pause for a minute, and then continued singing again. Out of curiosity, I opened the window and was about to sing the next verse of the song to surprise her. However, before that, I sent a text message to my friend. Hey, someone is singing outside and keeps repeating the same part. LOL, should I sing along with her? Not long after, my friend responded, and then I had to shut the window quietly because I was terrified. The text said, "Don't do that. That's a ghost. When ghosts find someone to harm, they first sing."
That ad just made it not scary. Literally.
And then wait.
What?
Someone to harm, they first sing, and then wait.
Okay, so they're cutting off what's it called? Scary stories, cause I seen that scary story, but they just cut it off. Okay.
This happened not long after we moved into our house in 2003. It was a nice and big house, which was made in the 1950s. One day I was in my backyard watering the grass, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that made me pause. There was a man standing next to the shrubs near our backyard's wall. He was dressed like a carpenter. His head looked like it was tilted sideways, and his body was slightly facing our fences sideways. Then he saw me and smiled kindly at me. At first, I thought he was fixing someone's house, and that it was his job. However, only after he faced me, I realized that wasn't the case. When I looked at him with narrowed eyes, I noticed that his neck was visibly broken, causing his head to awkwardly tilt to the side. I then saw that he waved at me once, but I was too shocked to scream at the time. After I regained consciousness, I looked around, but he had vanished and had literally faded away. 2 nights later, I woke up at 3 a.m. Noise was coming from my ceiling. It sounded like someone wearing construction boots was walking very slowly. I started to freak out, thinking that it might be a thief. However, I suddenly realized that that part of the roof was so thin, which meant nobody could walk on it. The steps abruptly stopped after a while, and when I felt at ease, I heard another horrible sound. I heard a sharp scream that sounded like a man, then a loud thud, as if someone had dropped on my ceiling, followed after. I covered my head with a blanket. My hands and whole body shivered, and after 10 minutes of nothing, I peeked outside. It was completely quiet. I saw and heard nothing, but I couldn't fall back asleep that night.
Anything bad?
The next morning, I started to look up the history of the house. To my surprise, it turned out that there was a report about the carpenter I met a few days before in the backyard.
Wait, what?
In 1958, he had been hired to fix the roof while the owners were on vacation. However, the carpenter had fallen abruptly through the weak spot on the roof while he was working and had broken his neck. He couldn't scream for help, and no one ever knew what happened to him as the owners were gone for 2 weeks. He was finally found when they came back, but had already died. This happened right above my bedroom. Suddenly, I felt bad for the poor guy, and I guess he's still looking after things. Since then, I've seen him sometimes, but I'm no longer afraid of him.
No compromises. Powerful or easy?
But
How
he's
about
acting
both?
annoying, bro.
How about a...
This story is about when I first moved to the city and joined the company. Our company was running a dormitory at the time, and I was the one from the countryside, so I decided to stay in the dormitory. One day after work, I came back to the dormitory and was eating my dinner with the TV on. It was almost midnight after working overtime. I was laughing and watching some comedy shows, and then I felt a sudden strangeness. You know, like it feels like someone is staring at you. Feeling weird, I turned my head toward the window, and I couldn't move as my whole body stiffened with a tremendous chill. I couldn't even scream. The woman's face was stuck in the window as I turned casually to look. and she was staring at me
How's the man
without
huge?
any movement. Now, let's think about it. The windows in the dorm were not even small. It was just the size of a normal person's upper body. But look, a face big enough to fill that size of a window? Can you imagine what it was? And what was scarier was, I was on the 5th floor at the time. How could she even stand over there, staring at me? I was frozen. I couldn't run away. I could only just watch her glaring eyes. It was lucky that I could move as the ghost disappeared the moment someone knocked on my door. One of my coworkers in the next room came to my room saying that he had something urgent to do. And when he looked at my pale face, he asked me if I was okay. So I explained to him what I had just saw. And then his face looked a little stiff. Well, he didn't say anything anymore, but I knew it. I was sure. I'm not the only one who saw her here. Anyway, something strange has happened to me since then. Sometimes when people get together and talk about ghost stories, I suddenly start to feel nauseous, like ghosts are coming to see me. For example, one day I was with my friends in a restaurant, and as soon as they started talking about ghosts, my skin turned pale, and I started sweating all over my body. At first, they thought I was lying or trying to prank them. But when I looked at the door with a serious look on my face and told my friends not to keep telling those stories, they all had to shut up. I think something's wrong with me.
Freaking flies in here, bro. I said
So
flies,
anyone who's
flies.
watching this story, I hope you guys always check out the window, especially when you're alone in your house. Always.
Okay, I'm not alone in my house.
There
but
is
I'm
one
going
food
upstairs.
you should always eat if you want to live to age 120. I discovered this one food by flying around the world for 25 years, interviewing scientists, investigating men who are healthy and happy at 110.
Yeah, this is around 5 minutes in, bro. Thank you for telling me, though.
I used to live with my grandmother, who died a few years ago. My grandmother had suffered a cerebral infarction during her lifetime, so she couldn't use her arms or legs at all, and she couldn't even speak. She could only mumble and grunt. Because I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, I felt sorry for her whenever I saw her. One day, my family gathered together at my house to celebrate a big holiday. While we were eating delicious food and chatting with each other, my
How old
grandmother
are
was
you
sitting
to be
alone
drinking
in her
wine, ma'am?
room.
No, joking.
A few hours
Well,
had
it looked like she was
passed,
young that
and
time.
it was time for everyone to
Yo,
go
it's
home.
cold. I don't even have
So my
AC
relatives
on.
said their goodbyes.
The heck?
However, my grandmother was still in her room at that time, so I stayed with her. I sat next to her, just in case. "Grandma, do you want to go outside and say goodbye to everyone?" I asked, looking at her face. Then Grandma slowly turned her head towards me and opened her mouth. "I'm embarrassed." At that instant, I couldn't believe that she spoke with such clear and accurate pronunciation.
What the heck?
A few years later, after my grandma had died, I told my family what happened that day when I was at the funeral hall, but no one believed me. Today, I'm going to talk about a story that I read somewhere. A few years ago, a body was found in the countryside. It was especially difficult to identify the victim or the perpetrator of that incident because the body had been dead for quite a long time, and to make matters worse, the bones had changed and were bleached. However, the police found one strange thing in this difficult situation. Only one finger from its body remained completely intact. They asked the National Forensic Service, and they finally completed the identification on the body's finger. Furthermore, they succeeded to arrest the criminal as a result of the investigation. It turned out that the assailant was her roommate. They said that he beat her to death on a rainy day and buried her in the mountain behind their house. After that, the detective who was in charge said in his interview, "When you're in charge of a case, there are often things that occur that can't be explained. However, I can tell you that ghosts really exist." I'll admit that what I'm about to tell you is not that creepy. My grandmother passed away not too long ago. After staying 3 days in the funeral home, we were supposed to go to the cemetery following her cremation. They said it would take about an hour, so my mom told me to take a nap in the car until the cremation was done. Since I was the one who had to drive later, I went back to my car alone and fell asleep. However, not long after, someone started shaking me. I heard my name, so I slowly opened my eyes, and my grandmother was sitting next to me. "Grandma?" I asked, rubbing my eyes, and she smiled at me. "Yes, it's me. Your grandpa is calling me. I'll go first, so stop sleeping and get up." I really missed her. Crying in my dream, I suddenly woke up with a surge of longing for her. I kept crying and then came out of the car. At that moment, I saw my family walking towards me, carrying a box of grandmother's ashes and her picture. I immediately told my mom about my dream, and then she patted me on the back and said this: "I guess Grandma wanted to say goodbye before she left. Maybe you were the only one who was sleeping, so she wanted to say goodbye to you."
Hey sis, it's Fleecemas. Cross everybody off your gift list. The whole squad looking fly in the houses. It's the coziest Fleecemas that ever existed.
Shop cozy styles for everyone on your list. We holiday only at Old Navy and OldNavy.com.
Okay, no, only Navy going
One evening, I was looking for an internet cafe because I needed to send a few emails. I spotted one in an old building. The sign said it was on the 6th floor. When I walked through the entrance, there was a dark hallway that led to a small elevator. I pressed the call button, and when the doors opened, I stepped inside. In a lot of Asian countries, many buildings do not have a 4th floor. The number 4 is considered bad luck because the word 4 sounds almost the same as the word for death. When it stopped and the doors opened, I was about to step out when I realized that something was wrong. The hallway was in total darkness. By the light emanting from the elevator, I could make out a random piece of furniture covered with white cloth. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I thought I might have gotten off on the wrong floor, so I checked the buttons, but none of them were lit up. There was nothing to indicate which floor I was on. Just then, I noticed something moving at the end of the darkened hallway. I couldn't quite make out what it was, but it looked like a person dressed in some type of gown. The figure was moving slowly down the hallway towards the elevator. It creeped me out, and in a panic, I started pressing the closed door button. All of a sudden, the light in the elevator flickered and turned off. I was plunged into the pitch darkness. I was so freaked out I almost wet myself. Just as I was about to lose it completely, the lights flickered back on. The doors closed. The elevator jolted back to life and began to ascend again. I breathed a sigh of relief. When the doors opened this time, I was at the internet cafe. I went over to the counter and told the girl who worked there and what had happened. As she listened, her face grew pale. She said that some of the customers and a few of her co-workers had experienced the same thing. She had never experienced anything herself, but she told me about the history of the building. Apparently, the 4th floor had been a hair salon at one time. It was prospering and doing pretty good, until one of the women who worked there killed herself in the salon. Nobody knew the reason why. The salon continued to operate, but they were plagued by weird and inexplainable events. Sometimes when customers were having their hair washed, the water would turn as red as blood. Other people claimed that when they looked in the mirror, they would catch glimpses of a ghostly figure standing behind them. When they turned around, there would be no one there. Because of these events, the salon developed a bad reputation and began to lose customers. Eventually, they were forced to close down. The building's owner tried to rent the fourth floor out to other businesses, but when they found out what had happened, nobody would take it. Finally, the owner reduced the price to nearly nothing, and it was rented by a businessman who planned to open a stationery supply store. However, when they tried to do some renovations on the floor, there was a series of mysterious accidents. The workmen's tools would sometimes disappear, only to be found in strange places. A large mirror suddenly shattered when nobody was near it, and the workman had his hand crushed when the elevator closed unexpectedly. Eventually, the workmen were so spooked that they refused to continue. The building's owner gave up trying to rent the fourth floor out and just shut it down. He had the buttons in the elevator replaced, and it was reprogrammed that nobody could go on the fourth floor. At least that's what's supposed to happen. For some reason, when people took the elevator, it would sometimes stop on the fourth floor, and when the doors opened, some people would see a figure coming toward them in the darkness. I honestly still don't know what that was.
Why does it look like the girl from my Scary Stories animation, bro?
When I was a little girl, I had the same dream several times. In these dreams, I used to see an old lady who kept running after me. She was wearing Korean traditional clothes called a hanbok and put her white hair up. Whenever it happened, she was kind of far away from me, so I tried to run away from her at full speed. But then, when I turned my head around, in less than 3 seconds, she had already reached me and was right behind me with an angry look on her face and stretching out her hand. So I always woke up crying when I felt like I was going to get caught by her. That horrible situation repeated over and over again whenever I had a dream. However, the interesting thing was that I never got caught by her in my dream. Because I was so young at the time, it was really scary to see that old lady in my dream, so I tried to not fall asleep. But eventually, I couldn't win and sleep took over my body. And the same thing happened again. In one dream, I was playing at the playground with my older brother. We were playing with some dirt, and I could see
guys,
the
I'll be right
old
back,
lady
okay?
watching us as
So guys, I do gotta go, so well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.